if we take the next step, it's also about understanding where does your portfolio sits right now. And so, of course, as a part of the property plan, you should do that. You should assess where your property portfolio sits. But a lot of people fall into this policy of holding properties forever, fingers crossed, hoping to the gods of property that the property is going to grow, right? And so ultimately, the next step in, asking these questions to you is, does my portfolio needs to change? Does it needs any remedy? Does it needs anything different? What does my portfolio needs right now is a very important question.
Yeah, this is incredibly important. I feel, I do see that there's a camp for holding property forever, right? And then there is another camp which is a bit more transactional. Which camp are you in?
Look, I think every property has its own way of telling. Like there are key indicators that would tell you how long do you need to hold property for. I always treat property as another investment class, right? And so the transactional nature of property investing may be different to shares, because you buy and sell shares with the time frame of a day or two or a month. Cryptos is minutes and hours, right? Property might be 6 or 7 or 8 years. And so if you've got that 70-80% growth in the first 6-7 years, why don't you sell and basically move on and do it again, right? Ultimately, how fast you want to grow your property portfolio depends on that, right? But you don't have to do it forever. I think if you have a good 7 to 8 year run in your property portfolio, making the right decisions, even wrong decisions, but identifying the wrong decisions and correcting it quickly, you would get to where you want to get to. A lot of people fail because they make a mistake and they wait for that mistake to correct automatically. And so they don't really treat their property as a business or the property journey as a business. They treat this truly as a passive income. And so, like any other business owner, you find a person who is non-performing, you're not going to wait for them to, one day wake up in the morning and have this sort of dawning on them that they are going to be the high performer in the team, right? Property is exactly that. It's not performing. You move on, cut your losses, move on.
What are some of the key things to look out for when it's a red flag about your portfolio needing to be corrected?
Look, typically, and we've done this episode, previously, I think we talked about this property portfolio fixer, and it's sitting on my website as well, that asks you structured questions as to, okay, about each and every property, whether that needs to sell or not, and the first and the most important question is, how long have you held this property for? Has this property grown in value? If it's not grown in value, is it going to grow in value? What key indicators are you going to look at to give you that confidence that it's going to grow in value? If it's not going to grow in value, can you sell it without causing any losses to you and come out of it? If you can't sell it as is, can you create an exit strategy for yourself? Could you, change the configuration, do a subdivision or something along the lines, to uplift the value to give you a clean exit? What does that look like over the next 6 months, 12 months? What is the opportunity cost at that price point? If you're holding $1 million property that's not grown in value because, it's next to train lines and power lines with the big, massive easement running through the property, what is the benefit of you holding this property? How much are you losing as an opportunity cost? And so all of these questions are very structured questions. And so when I talk about that property portfolio fixer, that basically gives you a single snapshot that these questions you should ask about every property every time you're going to buy the next property for the property portfolio that you have. And that would give you a really clear direction whether this property is going to give you the benefit that you really want in your investment property life cycle, or you should just move away and cut your losses and onto something else.
Yeah, and I know we did that years ago when we first bought negative geared property. It was so cool at the time. And one of the negative geared properties was in a 1-bedroom studio. And I went, I don't think it's going to perform very well. Yeah, it increased a little bit. We got some income out of it, but we found that there were more apartments being built. It was getting older. We got to, strata and things like that. So that for me was a clear indicator that that property needed to be disposed of, and it allowed us to go into other things. So I don't necessarily think that you need to hold property all the time, but I do think that you should assess and make all the right sort of checks to see if are there different ways to increase the yield? Are there different ways to so that you can hold on to it and take advantage of any equity increase? But yes, you need to be able to assess that.
The important thing also is that when you're thinking about your property plan, right? Your property portfolio is not going to always require growth. If you're 55-year-old, you don't care about growth, right? You're like, who cares? Or you're 60 years old, you don't care about growth. You'll be like, well, if I'm going to wait another 10 years, I'll probably die, right? Touch wood, God forbid. And so the thinking mechanism changes, like people, and I'm not trying to be negative here. I'm trying to, take a very extreme position around this, but, naturally people favor different things at different times, right? So when I'm young, I'll be focused more on growth because I want to scale my property portfolio. I'm making enough money. I don't care about saving. I'm going to reinvest continuously. And so I'm going to take more risks. As you mature, you have a family in place, your money going out because of the outlays in relation to expenses, you would favor more towards, cash coming back into your property portfolio, but you still want that growth. And so that balance needs to be there. As you grow towards your maturity or towards retirement, you start focusing more on, cash flow coming back. You're like, well, net wealth is great, but, I'm not going to really, this is me now talking about generational wealth, right? I'm not going to use this. If I have a $10 million portfolio that only generates $50,000 in net income, then what good is it doing me, right?